The human who accidentally conquered an empire at 3:17 fleet time. The 9th Spear Squadron watched a human walk across the burning skin of a star fortress that no living creature was supposed to cross. Behind him, 3 cruisers were splitting apart. Above him, boarding torpedoes screamed through the black. Beneath his boots, the outer armor of Ravelin 7 was glowing red from sustained plasma fire, hot enough to soften military hull plating and turn exposed flesh into vapor. The human kept walking. He wore no combat armor. He carried no rifle. He had no emergency tether connected to the hull. His Navy maintenance shirt was wrinkled. One sleeve was rolled slightly higher than the other, and in both hands he held a gray rectangular device with a cable hanging from it. Enemy shock troops landed less than 40 meters away. They opened fire. The first burst carved molten trenches across the deck behind him. The second struck an armored fuel conduit and produced an explosion large enough to throw 2 Varkash soldiers into open space. The human did not run. He did not duck. He barely looked up. He simply stepped around a burning section of hull, crouched beside a communications housing, pushed the cable into an emergency port, and began adjusting the device in his hands. Then the fortress shook. A Varkash dreadnought fired its spinal cannon directly through Ravelin 7's defense ring. The stars disappeared behind white fire. Every surviving officer in the command center thought they were watching the final seconds of the fortress. But the human remained crouched beside the relay housing. A status light on his device changed from amber to green. At exactly frame 611, while enemy soldiers advanced through the smoke and an entire squadron died in the sky behind him, the human smiled. Fleet Command saw the footage 17 minutes later. By then, someone had already classified it as a psychological weapon. Commander Zerva hovered above the floor of the intelligence chamber, silver mist coiling tightly around her lower body as the recording played for the 11th time. No one spoke until the human smiled again. The expression lasted less than a second. It was still, enough to make the room uncomfortable. Fleet Analyst Shankala stood with both webbed hands pressed against the edge of the central console. The bioluminescent lines across her shoulders pulsed slowly, the pattern she displayed whenever she was waiting for everyone else to finish being wrong. Combat veteran Kethrax remained near the door. His 4 secondary arms were folded flat against his back, but the claws at their ends had not stopped moving since the footage began. Technician Klaxon leaned toward the display, scales dark with concentration. Zerva stopped the recording. The official position, she said, is that the Varkash Dominion fabricated this footage to convince our crews that humans possess abnormal resistance to fear, pain, and combat stress. Kethrax stared at the frozen image. One human is apparently sufficient. He is wearing a maintenance shirt. That may be intentional. He is holding a router. That may also be intentional. Kethrax's primary arms crossed over his chest. Have we considered the possibility that he is simply stupid? We are not authorized to consider that until we have eliminated every explanation that sounds more professional. Shankala's shoulder lights brightened. The footage is authentic. The room became very still. Zerva turned toward her. You have not examined it. I have examined the transmission header. There is no distribution compression, no color reconstruction, and no embedded emotional audio layer. Propaganda is edited to look convincing. This recording looks terrible. Klaxon nodded reluctantly. She is right. Half the image is corrupted by radiation noise. That could be deliberate. It could, Shankala said. But it would require the Varkash to simulate damage from a relay camera they did not know was still operational, using lens defects specific to a model discontinued 19 years ago. Zerva's mist tightened. Then we enhance every frame. And if we find no fabrication? Zerva looked at the smiling human. Then we find a different explanation before Fleet Command decides that humanity has invented a new type of soldier. The intelligence server base smelled of heated metal, ozone, and overworked cooling fluid. Klaxon considered this the correct smell for a room containing honest machines. He arranged 4 data tablets across a service card and ran a different enhancement sequence on each one. Give me one impossible shadow, he muttered. One duplicated particle trail. One reflection that disagrees with the stars. I am not asking for much. The machines gave him nothing. Kethrax watched the footage from behind him. He had survived 6 boarding actions, the collapse of the Varen defensive line, and 11 hours trapped inside a ruptured carrier with enemy troops moving through the ventilation shafts. He knew what real combat looked like. He disliked how real the footage looked. The Varkesh weapons are genuine, he said. Klaxon enlarged a burst of plasma crossing the frame. Confirmed. Thermal expansion matches their standard infantry accelerator. The hull strikes are consistent with live ammunition. Shankala examined another display. The explosions align with damage recorded by Ravelin 7's internal sensors. No inserted sound. No sound exists in the original file, Klaxon said. The exterior camera did not have an audio pickup. Kethrax watched the human step through a cloud of burning debris. That somehow makes it worse. Klaxon advanced the footage one frame at a time. The object in the human's hands gradually became clear. Rectangular casing. Diagnostic screen. External battery socket. A cable designed for physical network access. Klaxon stopped. No, Shankala leaned closer. What is it? A Colonial Systems LR-14 maintenance router. Kethrax's secondary arms unfolded slightly. The supposed human superweapon has a manufacturer's warranty? An expired manufacturer's warranty. Important distinction. It is important to the manufacturer. Klaxon sharpened the image again. Tiny markings appeared on the side of the device. Property of infrastructure services. The room remained silent. Kethrax looked from the label to the human crouching beneath enemy fire. You are telling me he crossed the exterior hull during a fleet assault to perform network maintenance. I am telling you what the pixels say. I have not yet decided what reality is saying. Shankala pulled up the fortress schematics. The housing beside him is Relay Junction 42. It carries targeting synchronization, internal alerts, and fighter control telemetry between the northern defense ring and the command core. That sounds tactically significant, Kethrax said. It is also responsible for maintenance requests, crew messaging, environmental diagnostics, and cafeteria inventory. Kethrax looked at the human again. Which function was broken? Klaxon checked the outage record. All of them. Zerva entered the server bay just as Klaxon isolated the frame in which the human smiled. Tell me you found evidence of fabrication. We found evidence of a maintenance department. That is not what I asked. It is unfortunately what reality provided. They returned to the intelligence chamber and projected the enhanced recording across the curved wall. At full resolution, the battle became even more violent. Varkesh assault ships hammered the fortress. Coalition fighters spun through clouds of wreckage. A defense cruiser detonated in the distance, its reactor becoming a miniature sun. The human appeared between all of it, moving toward Relay Junction 42 with the focused irritation of someone who had been interrupted before breakfast. Zerva watched him kneel. He removed the access cover. He connected the router. A Varkesh soldier emerged through the smoke behind him. The soldier raised a weapon. A coalition interceptor crashed into the hull between them, scattering armor fragments across the deck. The human looked over his shoulder. For one terrible moment, everyone in the room believed he had finally understood what was happening. Then he picked up a loose screw, returned it to the access cover, and continued working. Kethrax's claws dug into the back of his chair. He saw the crash. He may have thought it was a component failure, Klaxon said. A fighter struck the fortress 20 meters from his body. Humans have unusually broad definitions of component failure. Shankala advanced to frame 611. The amber light turned green. The human smiled. Zerva floated closer to the image. It was not the smile of a warrior enjoying battle. It was not the expression of a fanatic welcoming death. It was small, private, and unmistakably sincere. The smile of a technician whose equipment had worked correctly on the first attempt. He is pleased, Zerva whispered. Yes, Shankala said, while a dreadnought is firing on him. He may not be pleased about the dreadnought. Then what is he pleased about? Klaxon pointed at the router display. The relay handshake completed. Silence spread through the chamber. Kethrax slowly lowered his head into his hands. Zerva stared at the human for another 12 seconds. Find him. Carl Mercer arrived at the interrogation chamber 9 minutes after being summoned. That was either remarkably efficient or deeply suspicious. He wore a clean navy shirt, sleeves rolled to exactly the same point on both forearms. A small tool pouch hung from his belt. There was a dark stain on one knee of his trousers and a thin scratch along his right hand. He looked around the chamber, noticed the military intelligence insignia, and sighed. Am I in trouble? You are not in trouble, Zerva said. Carl sat in the only chair. That usually means I am in a more complicated kind of trouble. You are the subject of a formal investigation. That would be the more complicated kind. Kethrax stood against the wall, her secondary arms folded tightly behind him. Klaxon activated the display. The footage froze on Carl crossing the burning exterior hull of Raveland 7. Carl leaned forward. Recognition moved across his face, followed by embarrassment. Oh, he said. You found that camera. Zerva's mist snapped inward. You knew you were recorded? I saw the camera after I finished. I thought it was offline. It was not. That explains the meeting. Were you present on the northern defense ring during the Varkesh assault? I was present near Junction 42. That is located on the northern defense ring. Then yes. Why? Carl glanced at the frozen image. The junction stopped responding. Zerva waited. Carl waited with her. That is your complete explanation? It had an open maintenance ticket. A Varkesh invasion fleet was attacking the fortress. I know that. Now. Kethrax's secondary arms moved away from his back. Now. Carl looked at him. I did not know it then. The temperature of the room seemed to drop. Zerva spoke slowly. You walked onto the exterior hull of a military fortress during a full enemy assault without realizing a battle was occurring. When you say it like that, it sounds irresponsible. How else would you say it? I was responding to an outage. During an invasion. I was not aware of the invasion. Enemy weapons were striking the hull around you. I assumed the defense batteries were running another calibration exercise. A cruiser exploded behind you. I thought that was a reactor purge. A fighter crashed 20 meters from your position. That one did concern me. Kethrax pushed away from the wall. Finally, I thought it might damage the relay housing. Kethrax stopped moving. Klaxon turned his face away, pretending to inspect the interrogation controls. Zerva's glow faded toward gray. Why did you not receive the combat alert? Carl performed a familiar movement, pushing 2 fingers against the bridge of his nose despite not wearing glasses. The combat alert runs through the fortress relay grid. Yes. Junction 42 was not communicating with the command core. That was the failure you were repairing. Correct. So the system responsible for notifying you of the attack could not notify you because the system responsible for notifying you of the attack had failed. That is my current theory. You were sent to repair the system whose failure prevented you from knowing it was unsafe to repair the system. That is a very accurate summary. Kethrax made a low sound in his throat. Zerva turned toward the frozen image. You were smiling. Carl's expression changed. For the first time, he looked faintly proud. The handshake completed on the first cycle. Klaxon closed his eyes. Carl continued. Those older relays usually get stuck during identity verification. You reset them, they reject the network key, then you have to clear the cache and restart everything. It can take 40 minutes. You were happy because it saved you 40 minutes? Closer to 35. Enemy. Soldiers were advancing toward you. I did not see them. One aimed a weapon at your back. Carl stared at the screen. That is unpleasant to learn. You did not sense anything unusual? There was a lot of vibration. The fortress was being bombarded. I thought the stabilizers were old. They are old, Klaxon admitted. Zerva looked at him. That is not helpful. It is factually relevant. Carl leaned back in his chair. I want it stated clearly that I was not being brave. No one has accused you of bravery. Fleet Command has apparently accused me of being psychologically invulnerable. You are not psychologically invulnerable. Good. You were simply too uninformed to experience fear. That sounds much more like me. Kethrax studied him. You crossed an exposed hull without an emergency tether. I had a tether. The room paused. Carl pointed to his waist in the recording. A thin line was visible behind his tool pouch. Klaxon enlarged the frame. The tether ended after less than a meter. It is not connected to anything, Kethrax said. Carl examined the image. I must have forgotten to clip it. Zerva's form dimmed almost to transparency. For several seconds, she appeared to reconsider every decision that had brought her into military intelligence. We are going to Raveland 7, she said. Kethrax immediately objected. No, we need physical verification. We have sensor logs. Fleet Command believes this man may represent a human combat doctrine. He represents a failure of supervision. That is what we need to prove. You intend to return him to the site where he nearly died without noticing? Yes. That is the worst available plan. It is the only available plan. Carl raised one hand. Should I bring the router? Every eye turned toward him. For diagnostic purposes, he added. The northern defense ring of Ravelin 7 looked different without smoke covering it. The battle had left long black scars across the hull. Entire weapon towers had been torn away. Emergency repair crews moved between temporary pressure domes, while salvage drones collected fragments of destroyed fighters. Beyond the fortress, the remains of both fleets drifted through space. Carl stepped from the shuttle and immediately began walking toward Junction 42. Kethrax caught the back of his shirt. Wait. Carl stopped. What? Look around. Carl surveyed the destruction. A cruiser wreck rotated slowly beyond the defense ring. Bodies in sealed combat armor were being recovered by drones. A section of hull the size of a city district had been melted into an uneven metallic crater. Carl's face lost some of its color. That happened during the outage? That happened around you. Oh, for the first time, his voice contained genuine fear. Zerva felt an unexpected flicker of relief. Then Carl noticed the relay housing. Oh, that access panel is still open. He began moving again. Kethrax retained his grip. We are still looking around. I have looked. You looked for 4 seconds. I understand the general situation. You failed to understand the general situation while it was trying to kill you. That is fair. They crossed the damaged hull together. Shankala compared scorch patterns with the recording. Klaxon inspected the relay housing. Kethrax positioned himself between Carl and every object that looked capable of exploding. There were many. Carl crouched beside Junction 42. The reset was clean, he said. A plasma scar crossed the deck beside his boot. You were standing here, Kethrax said. Yes. When the first enemy squad came through the breach. So I have been told. Carl opened the housing. No damage to the contact plate. No arc scoring. The network key registered correctly. Honestly, considering the vibration, this is some of my better work. Kethrax stared at him. You are evaluating workmanship at the exact location where an enemy soldier attempted to execute you. I cannot evaluate the enemy soldier. That is outside my department. Shankala's shoulder lights pulsed with contained amusement. Zerva moved along the hull, reconstructing the event. The camera angle was genuine. The damage was genuine. The relay failure had occurred exactly as Carl described. There was no secret human combat doctrine. No engineered immunity to fear. No psychological attack. There was only a technician, an unanswered maintenance request, and a communications failure so complete that it had concealed an invasion from a man walking through it. Zerva filed her report 3 hours later. The language was careful. The video was authentic. The human subject had entered an active combat zone while responding to a routine infrastructure alert. His apparent calm resulted from a lack of situational awareness caused by the same communications failure he had been attempting to repair. His smile indicated professional satisfaction after a successful network reset. No evidence supported claims of enhanced durability, abnormal courage, or deliberate psychological warfare. Zerva added one final recommendation. Any maintenance system capable of routing a civilian technician through an ongoing invasion without displaying an emergency warning should be considered a more immediate threat than the technician. Fleet Command accepted the report. No disciplinary action was taken against Carl Mercer. At the bottom of the official response, however, someone several ranks above Zerva had added a private instruction. Keep him under observation. Zerva read the sentence twice. Kethrax read it once. There will be another incident, he said. That is not inevitable. It is. We will establish monitoring. He will find a way around it without knowing it exists. Zerva wanted to disagree. She could not. The next incident occurred 9 days later. At 4:06, an environmental regulator aboard carrier Horizon Pike reported an unstable oxygen mixture in Launch Bay 3. At 4:07, Carl saw the maintenance ticket. At 4:08, he decided it would take longer to wake the assigned technician than to perform the reset himself. At 4:11, he entered Launch Bay 3. What Carl did not know was that the 9th Spear Squadron was conducting a combat launch drill. 42 interceptor engines ignited simultaneously. The launch bay filled with warning sirens, magnetic turbulence, and enough engine wash to break an unprotected body against the rear bulkhead. Carl walked along the marked service lane, head lowered over his diagnostic tablet. 2 deck officers screamed at him. He waved. They assumed he had acknowledged the danger. He had actually mistaken them for mechanics he knew. The first interceptor launched. The pressure wave tore Carl's tool pouch from his belt. He turned, watched it slide across the deck and frowned. Then he continued toward the regulator. Zerva received the automated alert when Carl's identity tag crossed into the restricted zone. She arrived at the observation gallery with Kethrax and Klaxon just in time to see an interceptor pass less than 3 meters over his head. Zerva struck the emergency communication control. "Carl Mercer, stop moving." Carl touched the receiver in his ear. "I cannot hear you. The bay is loud. Stop moving." "What?" Kethrax took the microphone. "Get on the floor." Carl looked around. A second interceptor began its launch sequence. "Why?" The engines ignited. Kethrax slammed the emergency suspension control. Every interceptor in the bay shut down. The sudden silence was almost violent. Pilots shouted over the squadron channel. Deck crews demanded explanations. Carl stood alone in the center of the launch lane, holding his tablet. He looked up at the observation gallery. "Was that for me?" Zerva closed her eyes. Minutes later, security officers escorted him to the regulator housing. Carl opened the panel, inspected the error code, and made a small adjustment. The oxygen warning disappeared. "So," he said, "the regulator is fixed." Kethrax stood behind him, visibly struggling with an emotion no military training had prepared him to manage. "You entered an active launch bay." The ticket did not mention a drill. There were 42 fighters. I thought they were preparing for deployment. They were launching. That became clear eventually. An interceptor nearly removed your head. Carl considered this. "I thought the clearance looked slightly low." Fleet Command responded by creating Protocol Mercer. Any maintenance request assigned to Carl would be cross-referenced against tactical schedules, live exercises, hull breaches, reactor warnings, hostile activity, and predicted meteor impacts. His location tag would be monitored continuously. Restricted doors would reject his credentials during emergencies. Every control center in the sector received his image. The official alert beneath it read, "Do not allow this technician TO enter an active combat zone." For 27 days, the protocol worked. Then the Varkesh Dominion returned. They did not attack with one fleet. They came with 12. Thousands of warships emerged from dark space around the Naker Gate, spreading across the system in a formation so enormous that it blocked the light of the central star. At the center of the invasion moved the Dominion command vessel, the Maw of Ver. It was less a ship than a mobile extinction event. Its black hull stretched for 80 kilometers. Gravity weapons curved space around its armor. Entire squadrons disappeared into the distortion surrounding it. The coalition defense line collapsed in 14 minutes. Ravelin 7 lost its outer shield. Horizon Pike lost 2 engines. The battleship Resolute Meridian was cut in half by a single spinal cannon strike. The 9th Spear Squadron launched into a sky filled with burning ships. Zerva stood in the command center as tactical projections turned red. "The Varkesh are deploying boarding craft," Shankala reported. "How many?" "More than our tracking system can number." Kethrax tightened the seals on his combat armor. "They are not trying to destroy the fortress." Zerva understood immediately. They want the Naker Gate. If the Dominion captured the gate, it would gain direct access to the inner coalition worlds. 30 inhabited systems would lie defenseless. The fortress shook under another impact. Lights failed. Emergency illumination turned the command center blood red. Klaxon stared at his console. "We have lost internal network synchronization. Restore it." "I cannot. The northern relay grid is not responding." Zerva's mist froze. "Where is Carl?" No one answered. She asked again, "Where is Carl Mercer?" Klaxon searched the monitoring system. His scales drained pale. "His location tag is offline." Kethrax moved toward the door. "Find him." Protocol Mercer had failed for a simple reason. It relied on the internal network. The internal network was down. Carl had been in auxiliary maintenance when the alarms began. He saw the lights turn red, heard a distant explosion, and correctly concluded that something dangerous was happening. For the first time in his career, he decided not to investigate. Then his diagnostic terminal displayed a critical request. Relay Node 12B, total communication failure. Manual access required. Carl stared at the screen. The request carried the highest infrastructure priority. Without Node 12B, evacuation routes could not update. Medical teams could not locate casualties. Defense crews could not coordinate pressure doors. Carl checked the corridor. No one was present. He opened the emergency instructions. The network map loaded incorrectly. Half the corridors were missing. A route appeared in yellow. Carl followed it. The route took him through a service tunnel, down 2 emergency ladders, and across a damaged transport junction. He passed 3 wounded soldiers. He helped one closest suit SEAL. He passed a squad moving in the opposite direction. They shouted for him to return to shelter. Carl pointed at his tablet and said, "Critical relay failure." The squad leader assumed he had authorization. No one stopped him. The route ended at docking spine 6. A boarding torpedo had penetrated the outer hull. Its armored nose protruded through the passage like the head of an enormous metal insect. Varkesh soldiers poured from it. Carl saw them. They saw him. For one suspended second, everyone stopped. The Varkesh wore black armor, carried plasma weapons, and had rows of hooked sensory spines along their helmets. Carl wore a navy shirt and carried a maintenance router. He immediately understood that they were not coalition personnel. He also understood that running would probably attract attention. So he did the only thing his exhausted mind could produce. He lifted the router slightly. Maintenance. The lead Varkesh soldier stared at him. Carl pointed at the damaged wall. Relay failure. The Varkesh troops had studied human military behavior. They knew humans sometimes smiled when afraid. They knew humans advanced while injured. They knew humans had continued fighting on worlds after ammunition, food, and organized command had disappeared. They had also received the famous recording from Raveland 7. The recording showed a human walking calmly through plasma fire, operating a mysterious device and smiling while warships died behind him. Dominion intelligence had classified the human as a probable elite signal warfare operative. The soldier standing before Carl recognized his face. His weapon lowered by 5 centimeters. Carl interpreted this as permission to pass. Thank you. He stepped around the boarding squad. None of them fired. The lead soldier reported the encounter immediately. A human signal operative had breached the boarding perimeter. He was carrying the same device seen at Raveland 7. He appeared completely unafraid. The warning spread through the Dominion network. Carl continued following the damaged map. It led him through the boarding torpedo. He did not realize he had left the fortress until the hatch closed behind him. The interior was dark and narrow. Alien symbols covered the walls. Carl stopped. This is not docking spine 6. The torpedo detached. Carl felt the acceleration. He grabbed a support rail as the vessel launched away from Raveland 7. Through a small armored viewport, he saw the fortress receding behind him. Beyond it, thousands of ships burned. Carl stared at the battle. "Oh," he whispered. The boarding torpedo turned toward the Maw of Vare. Carl pulled out his communicator. No signal. He tried the emergency channel. No signal. He examined the router in his hands. The status light blinked amber. Of course. The torpedo entered the gravity distortion surrounding the Dominion command ship. Space twisted. Stars stretched into white curves. Carl's stomach attempted to move in several directions at once. The Varkesh soldiers remained pressed against the walls, watching him. They expected fear. Carl was afraid. He was more afraid than he had ever been. But he had learned something from the Raveland 7 investigation. When surrounded by heavily armed aliens who believed he possessed extraordinary courage, displaying panic was unlikely to improve the situation. So Carl concentrated on the router. It was easier to think about network errors than death. The torpedo docked. The hatch opened into a vast black corridor inside the Maw of Vare. Thousands of Varkesh troops were moving toward launch chambers. Officers shouted orders. Weapons platforms rolled across the deck. Carl looked at the blinking router. The diagnostic request was still active. Relay node 12B, manual access required. The corrupted map now showed the node somewhere inside the enemy dreadnought. Carl understood that the location data was wrong. He also understood that the router had detected a compatible network. That should have been impossible. Then he noticed a familiar junction label on the wall. Colonial Systems Interfleet Relay Assembly. The Varkesh had built their command network using captured human components. Carl felt offended. Not patriotic. Professionally offended. The assembly had been installed upside down. A cable designed for cooling control had been forced into an identification port. The emergency bypass was secured with a piece of metal wire. Carl moved closer. The Varkesh squad watched him. "This is terrible," he said. The soldiers raised their weapons. Carl pointed at the junction. Who installed this? No one answered. Because this is why your relay keeps losing synchronization. The lead soldier did not understand every word, but he understood the disgust in Carl's voice. He had seen senior weapons engineers use the same tone before executions. Carl opened the access panel. An alarm sounded across the corridor. The Varkesh troops stepped back. Carl connected his router. Far away, in the Coalition Command Center, Klaxon detected an impossible signal. He stared at the data. Commander. Zerva turned. Did you find Carl? I found his router. Where? Klaxon enlarged the tactical display. A single maintenance identifier was transmitting from the center of the enemy formation. From inside the Maw of Ver. Nobody spoke. Kethrax's secondary arms spread to their full combat width. That is not possible. The signal is authenticated. He cannot be aboard the Dominion command ship. The router disagrees. Zerva floated toward the display. How did he reach it? Shankala accessed boarding records. One enemy torpedo detached from docking spine 6. 3 minutes ago. Zerva's glow turned violently violet. He boarded an enemy boarding vessel. It may be more accurate to say the enemy boarding vessel boarded him. Open a channel. Klaxon tried. No response. Dominion jamming is blocking voice communication. Track the router. I am trying. The signal disappeared. For 2 seconds, Zerva thought Carl was dead. Then every tactical display in the command center went white. A new network appeared. Thousands of Dominion ships. Every dreadnought. Every cruiser. Every fighter squadron. Their internal identification codes, command paths, and shield harmonics flooded Coalition sensors. Klaxon stumbled backward from his console. He connected the router to the Dominion command grid. Shankala's lights flared. We can see their entire fleet. Can they see us? No. Their network is broadcasting diagnostic access. Kethrax stared at the enemy formation. What did he do? Inside the Maw of Ver, Carl watched the router attempt a handshake. The captured relay assembly rejected the first request. Carl frowned. Wrong identity cache. He cleared it. The second request failed. Of course it failed. You connected the cooling line to the authorization bus. He moved the cable. The corridor lights flickered. Across the Dominion fleet, command systems restarted. The Varkesh admiral aboard the Maw of Ver saw hundreds of warning messages appear simultaneously. Unauthorized human diagnostic protocol. Network synchronization active. External maintenance access enabled. He rose from his command throne. Find the human. The order spread across the dreadnought. The story spread faster. The human from Raveland 7 was aboard the ship. He had entered through a boarding torpedo. He had connected an unknown weapon to the fleet network. He was walking toward the command core. Some reports claimed weapons fire did not affect him. Others claimed he had allowed himself to be captured deliberately. By the time the 1st Security Battalion reached Carl's corridor, they believed they were facing a genetically engineered assault commander. Carl heard armored boots approaching. He looked at the router. The third handshake had begun. Hey. Progress indicator moved slowly across the screen. 31%. The security doors opened. Dozens of Varkesh troops aimed at him. Carl raised one hand. Please do not shoot the relay. The troops hesitated. 42%. Their commander shouted an order. Weapons charged. Carl looked at the incorrectly mounted junction. If you damage this, the whole network will probably fail. That sentence was translated imperfectly. The Varkesh heard. If you fire, your entire fleet will die. Several soldiers stepped backward. 57%. The commander fired. Carl dropped flat. The plasma bolt struck the wall above him and severed a power conduit. The relay assembly lost primary power. The diagnostic handshake switched to emergency mode. Carl saw the progress bar turn red. No, no, no. He reached inside the housing. More shots crossed the corridor. The Varkesh believed he was attempting to activate a weapon. Carl was attempting to prevent the router from restarting. He connected the emergency battery manually. The relay came back online. 74%. On Raveland 7, Zerva watched Dominion shield codes update in real time. Klaxon's claws flew across the controls. We can transmit commands to their defensive network. Can we disable the fleet? Not permanently. How long? If I send a force synchronization request, every ship will drop shields while verifying the new command key. For how long? 11 seconds. Kethrax looked at the tactical display. 11 seconds is enough. The 9th Spear Squadron was still fighting beyond the fortress. Only 19 of its 42 interceptors remained operational. Captain Yarosol received the targeting update and saw the enemy shield harmonics appear across her cockpit. Then Zerva's voice entered the squadron channel. Prepare for total Dominion shield collapse. Yara looked at the Maw of Ver. What caused it? Zerva hesitated. A maintenance issue. Inside the dreadnought, the handshake reached 92%. Carl's hands shook. Plasma fire struck the deck around him. A fragment sliced his shoulder. He barely felt it. He held the battery cable in place as the damaged relay attempted to disconnect. 95%. The Varkesh commander advanced. Carl saw him. The alien raised a weapon toward Carl's head. 98%. Carl closed his eyes. The router chimed. Handshake complete. Across the entire Dominion fleet, every shield collapsed. The night of space became white. Coalition batteries fired. The 9th Spear Squadron launched antimatter missiles into exposed engine cores. Fortress cannons struck Dominion cruisers from bow to stern. The Maw of Ver's gravity distortion vanished. 3 coalition battleships concentrated fire on its spinal weapon. The cannon exploded inside the dreadnought. The blast tore through 30 decks. The corridor threw Carl, the Varkesh commander, and half the security battalion against the walls. Emergency doors slammed shut. Gravity failed. Carl floated above the open relay housing, still holding the router. Its light was green. Despite the blood on his shoulder, the armed aliens surrounding him, and the fact that he was trapped inside the largest enemy warship ever constructed, Carl smiled. The handshake had worked. On Raveland 7, the transmission froze at that exact moment. Zerva stared at the image. Carl floating in a ruined enemy corridor. Varkesh troops scattered around him. Fire burning through the ceiling. The maintenance router glowing green in his hand. The same satisfied smile. Klaxon whispered, "He did it again." Kethrax did not look away from the display. "This time he knows there is a battle." "That is an important development," Shankala said. "It is not comforting." The shield collapse lasted 11 seconds. It changed the war. For Dominion dreadnoughts were destroyed. 17 cruisers surrendered after losing command contact. The Maw of Ver suffered catastrophic propulsion damage and began drifting toward the Naker Gate. Its internal network remained open. Coalition assault teams launched immediately. Kethrax led the first wave. The 9th Spear Squadron escorted the boarding craft through clouds of wreckage. As they approached the Maw, Dominion defense turrets rotated toward them. Klaxon transmitted a maintenance shutdown request. Every turret powered off. "Carl left us administrative access," he said over the channel. Kethrax tightened his grip on his rifle. Of course he did. Coalition troops entered the dreadnought through 6 launch bays. Resistance was scattered. Varkesh soldiers had lost communication with their commanders. Security doors opened at random. Environmental systems shifted between emergency settings. Instructions appeared on Dominion terminals in human maintenance code. At the center of the chaos, one message repeated across the ship: relay synchronization successful. Contact infrastructure services if problems continue. Kethrax followed Carl's signal through the damaged corridors. The deeper he moved, the stranger the reports became. A Varkesh squad had surrendered after seeing Carl enter a ventilation shaft. Another had abandoned its position because it believed the human had poisoned the ship's atmosphere. 3 officers claimed Carl could control locked doors by touching them. Carl could not control locked doors. He had found a manual release lever. When Kethrax finally reached him, Carl was crawling beneath a damaged command conduit with the router clamped between his teeth. 2 Varkesh soldiers stood nearby with their weapons on the floor. Kethrax aimed at them. They immediately raised their hands. Carl emerged from beneath the conduit. "Oh good. You found me." Kethrax stared at the surrendered soldiers. "What happened here?" "They were guarding the junction." "Why did they surrender?" "I asked them to move." "And they surrendered?" "I may have pointed at the router." Kethrax closed all 6 of his eyes for 1 second. "We are leaving." "I cannot." "That was not a request. The command relay is pulling too much current. If it overloads, we lose the diagnostic connection. We are inside an enemy dreadnought." "I noticed." "You are injured." Carl looked at his shoulder. "Oh, you were shot at." "Yes." "You are afraid." "Extremely." Kethrax paused. Carl's hands were trembling. His face was pale. For the first time, Kethrax understood that the human's calm was not courage and not ignorance. Not entirely. Carl knew exactly where he was. He knew the ship could explode. He knew enemy soldiers were hunting him. He was terrified. But the relay was failing, and thousands of coalition soldiers were entering the ship through systems connected to that relay. So Carl remained beside it. What happens if you disconnect? Kethrax asked. The security network may restore its original permissions. Our boarding teams would be trapped. Yes. How long until the repair is stable? 10 minutes. An explosion shook the corridor. Carl checked the router. Possibly 15. Kethrax turned toward his soldiers. Defensive formation. Carl looked up. You are staying? For 15 minutes. That seems dangerous. Kethrax stared at him. Carl nodded. Understood. The battle for the Maw of Vair moved toward the command core. Coalition troops advanced through hangars, reactor decks, and weapons chambers. The 9th Spear Squadron destroyed the last Dominion escorts attempting to reach the dreadnought. Ravelin's 7 fired magnetic anchors into the Maw's hull, preventing it from escaping through the Naker Gate. Zerva coordinated the assault while watching Carl's diagnostic signal. Every time it flickered, her mist tightened. The Varkesh admiral withdrew to the throne chamber. He still commanded 8,000 soldiers. He still controlled the dreadnought's reactor. If capture became inevitable, he could destroy the Maw of Vair and every coalition force aboard it. He ordered the reactor prepared for overload. The command reached engineering. The engineering crew attempted to comply. The reactor controls displayed a maintenance warning. Remote command unavailable during network synchronization. The admiral tried again. The same warning appeared. He struck the console. Who authorized synchronization? No officer answered. They all knew the answer. The human. The admiral had conquered 13 systems. He had destroyed planetary governments and watched fleets surrender at the sight of his vessel. For the first time in his life, he felt hunted. Not by an army, by a maintenance worker. Carl stabilized the relay after 13 minutes and 42 seconds. The moment the system stopped flickering, Klaxon transmitted new coalition security credentials through the open network. Every locked door. Aboard the Maw recognized coalition personnel as authorized crew. Every Varkesh officer lost command access. Weapons safeties activated. Prison cells opened. The Dreadnought's own systems announced that ownership authentication had changed. Kethrax stared at the notification on his armor display. Did we just capture the ship? Carl disconnected the router. I finished the reset. That was not my question. The reset allowed someone else to capture the ship. The distinction will not survive the official report. Carl closed the junction panel. I would prefer not to be included in the official report. You are going to be the official report. They moved toward the command core. Varkesh resistance collapsed around them. Entire units surrendered without firing. Some soldiers knelt when Carl passed. Others backed against the walls. One officer dropped his weapon and whispered a phrase through the translator. The unburned technician. Carl looked at Kethrax. What does that mean? Nothing useful. Is it about the Ravelin recording? Keep walking. The throne chamber doors opened automatically. The Varkesh admiral stood alone beside the command platform. Through the enormous forward window, the ruined Dominion fleet burned against the stars. The coalition flag appeared across the Dreadnought's navigation displays. The admiral looked at Kethrax. Then he looked at Carl. You, he said. Carl stopped. The translator rendered the admiral's voice as a deep metallic growl. You entered my vessel without armor. I entered by mistake. You opened our command network. I repaired a relay. You blinded 12 fleets. That was not intentional. You disabled my weapons. Someone else did that. You prevented the reactor overload. Carl considered this. That may have been related to the synchronization lock. The admiral stepped down from the command platform. His ceremonial armor was black and gold. A curved blade hung at his side. I have read the reports from Ravelin 7. Carl's expression tightened. I was hoping those had stopped circulating. They said you walked through a bombardment and smiled. The relay worked. They said you entered a launch bay, beneath moving fighters. The regulator was failing. They will say you boarded the Maw of Vair alone. I was transported here against my will. They will say you broke the Dominion. Carl glanced through the window at the burning fleet. I connected a router. The admiral stared at him. Then, very slowly, he removed his sword. Kethrax raised his rifle. The admiral placed the sword on the floor. I surrender the Maw of Vair to the human. Carl looked behind him. No other human was present. No, he said. The Admiral's sensory spines lifted. No, I am not authorized to accept a military surrender. Everyone in the throne chamber went silent. Carl pointed toward Kethrax. He is probably authorized. The Admiral looked at Kethrax. Kethrax looked at Carl. I accept, Kethrax said quickly. The Maw of Ver surrendered at 5:02 fleet time. Within 3 hours, the remaining Dominion ships in the system powered down their weapons. Within 2 days, footage from the dreadnought spread across every military network in known space. The first recording showed Carl passing a Varkesh boarding squad by raising a maintenance router. The second showed him working under fire while security troops retreated. The third froze on his smile as the Dominion fleet lost its shields. No government could suppress the images. The coalition celebrated him as the man who had walked into an enemy command ship and turned off an empire. The Varkesh described him as a human signal demon. Neutral systems began requesting defense treaties with Earth. 3 Dominion-controlled colonies rebelled after broadcasting Carl's image across public screens. Recruitment applications to human engineering units increased by 600%. Carl was placed under investigation again. This time, the interrogation room was aboard the captured Maw of Ver. Zerva hovered opposite him. Klaxon stood beside the wall. Shankala examined the recovered router. Kethrax remained near the door, his armor still marked by the battle. Carl's shoulder had been treated. He looked exhausted. Zerva placed the famous frame on the display. You smiled. The network handshake completed. You were aware of the battle. Yes. You were aware enemy soldiers were attempting to kill you. Very aware. You continued repairing the relay. The boarding teams needed the doors. Zerva's mist moved slowly around her. That sounds like bravery. Carl looked uncomfortable. I was mostly trying not to panic. Those conditions are not mutually exclusive. I would prefer the report emphasized the technical contribution. The technical contribution resulted in the capture of an 80-kilometer dreadnought. It was a network configuration problem. You changed the course of the war. I cleared an identity cache. You caused 12 fleets to lose their shields. Klaxon sent the synchronization request. Klaxon raised one claw. That is accurate. You enabled him. I connected a maintenance router to an unsecured relay. Zerva leaned forward. Inside the enemy flagship. The model was familiar. The flagship. The relay. Kethrax made a sound that might have been laughter. Zerva displayed the original report from Ravelin 7. At the time, I concluded that you possessed no unusual combat capability. I agree with that conclusion. I concluded that your apparent fearlessness resulted from a lack of awareness. That was also accurate. I recommended improving the maintenance alert system. A very good recommendation. Zerva replaced the report with a tactical image of the defeated Dominion fleet. Now I must explain how the same technician accidentally entered the most dangerous warship in the galaxy, exposed its military network, and caused the surrender of an Imperial armada. Carl thought for several seconds. The route map was corrupted. Zerva's glow intensified. That will be your explanation? It is the reason I entered the boarding torpedo. You passed armed enemy soldiers. They appeared confused. They recognized you. That is deeply unfortunate. They believed your router was a weapon. Carl looked at the gray device on the table. It has a 5-year-old battery and a cracked data port. They did not know that. Apparently, they believe you deliberately allowed yourself to be taken aboard. I did not. They believe every action was planned. It was not. They believe humanity can send technicians through enemy defenses because humans value successful maintenance above survival. Carl hesitated. That last part may be slightly true. Klaxon's scales brightened. Zerva stared at Carl until he looked away. Fleet Command arrived before the investigation ended. Admiral Saran entered the chamber with 6 officers and a stack of classified orders. She was human, 63 years old, and known for refusing to waste words. She looked at Carl. Are you the technician? Carl glanced around. Yes. Good. No, the Admiral stopped. No. I know that tone. What tone? The tone people use before assigning me something outside my department. Admiral Saran placed the classified orders on the table. You captured the Dominion command vessel. Kethrax accepted the surrender. You created the opportunity. The relay was improperly installed. You exposed a strategic weakness in Dominion systems. They used stolen human equipment without following documentation. You disabled their command network. Klaxon did that. You survived inside the Maw of Vare. Several times, barely. Admiral Saran studied him. What do you want? Carl answered without hesitation. I want the maintenance ticket for Relay Node 12B closed. No one spoke. The system still lists it as unresolved, Carl continued. Technically, it is connected to the captured dreadnought now, and I do not know which department owns the asset. Infrastructure says it belongs to Fleet Operations. Fleet Operations says captured enemy systems belong to Intelligence. Intelligence says it cannot close civilian maintenance requests. Zerva slowly turned toward Klaxon. Klaxon found something interesting on the wall. Admiral Saran looked down at the orders. What else? The captured ship has approximately 40,000 non-compliant relay assemblies. Non-compliant. Incorrect cable routing, exposed power contacts, unauthorized bypasses, missing thermal shielding. Some of them are upside down. The Admiral's face remained unreadable. Can they be repaired? Yes. How long? With a proper team, 6 months. And without a proper team? Carl looked through the chamber window at the vast interior of the captured dreadnought. Longer than I planned to remain alive. Admiral Saran opened the classified orders. Fleet Command wanted to create a new human infiltration division. Its personnel would carry maintenance equipment, exploit enemy infrastructure, and use the mythology surrounding Carl to induce confusion. Zerva read the proposal. Kethrax read it over her shoulder. Carl read 3 lines and pushed it away. No, Admiral Saran raised an eyebrow. You are refusing a direct commission? I am refusing to lead soldiers into combat while pretending routers are weapons. The enemy already believes they are. That does not make it a good idea. It worked. Once. Twice, depending on how we classify Raveland 7. Raveland 7 was an accident. So was the Maw of Vare. Carl opened his hands. That is exactly my point. Admiral Saran considered him for a long moment. Then she closed the orders. What do you recommend? Fix the alert systems. That is all. Repair the networks. Separate combat notifications from maintenance relays. Stop using single points of failure. Make restricted doors fail closed during boarding actions. Do not let navigation software route technicians through enemy vehicles. Zerva's mist shifted with restrained satisfaction. Carl continued. And train people to read installation manuals before connecting captured equipment. Klaxon nodded. That would have prevented most of this. Admiral Saran looked at the Dominion fleet burning beyond the window. Most of this won us a war. It nearly lost us a fortress first. That silenced the room. The truth was less heroic than the legend. The coalition had not survived because humans were fearless. It had survived because one human had exposed a chain of failures no one else had noticed. The same network weakness had concealed the first assault. The same weakness had allowed Carl to leave the fortress. The Dominion's reliance on captured technology had allowed his router to enter its command grid. The entire war had turned on systems everyone assumed would function because they had functioned yesterday. Admiral Saran withdrew the proposal. Protocol. Mercer was rewritten. The new protocol did not monitor Carl. It monitored every critical network in the fleet. Combat alerts gained independent transmitters. Maintenance routes were blocked automatically during hostile contact. Captured systems were isolated from operational networks. Emergency messages no longer depended on the equipment they were reporting as broken. The coalition began repairing the invisible weaknesses that nearly destroyed it. The story should have ended there. It did not. The legend grew faster than the truth. Across Dominion space, military commanders received the footage without context. They saw a human cross burning armor. They saw him pass an armed boarding squad. They saw him connect a small gray device to the Maw of Vare. They saw 12 fleets lose their shields. They saw the greatest dreadnought ever built surrender less than an hour later. They did not hear Carl explaining the corrupted route map. They did not care about the identity cache. They did not believe the captured relay had been installed upside down. The Dominion High Council concluded that the coalition possessed an army of human infrastructure infiltrators capable of turning military networks against their owners. 3 weeks after the Battle of the Naker Gate, the coalition fleet approached the Dominion fortress world of Sakar. Sakar's defense ring contained 6,000 weapons platforms. Its planetary shield could withstand a year of bombardment. Its orbital fleet outnumbered the coalition 4-1. Admiral Saran prepared for the bloodiest battle of the war. Before the first shot was fired, Sakar transmitted a surrender request. The message contained one condition. No human maintenance personnel would be permitted to board the planet until all military networks had been disconnected. Admiral Saran accepted. 4 more fortress systems surrendered during the following month. One disabled its own command grid after detecting an unidentified human aboard a civilian transport. The human was a refrigeration mechanic. He had never heard of Carl Mercer. Another Dominion admiral abandoned his flagship after a gray maintenance router was discovered in a storage compartment. It belonged to a Varkesh engineer. By the time the coalition reached the Dominion capital, half the Imperial fleet had refused to engage. The remaining commanders demanded visual confirmation that Carl Mercer was not present. Fleet Command provided it. The commanders assumed the recording was fabricated. They surrendered anyway. The Dominion fell not to a superior fleet, but to the belief that somewhere inside every ship, a human technician might be walking toward the wrong relay with a device no one understood. 6 months after the fall of the Dominion, Carl returned to Raveland 7. The fortress had been rebuilt. New armor covered the northern defense ring. Junction 42 had been replaced with a modern redundant relay. A small plaque had been installed beside it. At this location, human technician Carl Mercer restored fleet communications under enemy fire and inspired the defeat of the Varkesh Dominion. Carl read the plaque twice. Zerva hovered beside him. You dislike it. It is inaccurate. Which part? The relay did not restore fleet communications. It restored the northern network segment. Full synchronization happened 14 seconds later. Zerva looked toward the stars. Of course. And I did not inspire the defeat of the Dominion. You entered their flagship and exposed their entire command network. Because the route map was wrong. You have repeated that explanation for 6 months. It remains true. A formation of coalition fighters passed over the fortress. The 9th Spear Squadron had been rebuilt. Its pilots dipped their wings toward Carl. Carl looked behind him. They are saluting you, Zerva said. I was afraid of that. You could acknowledge them. I do not know how. Wave. Carl raised one hand. The fighters accelerated into the dark. For a moment, neither Carl nor Zerva spoke. The fortress hummed around them. Beyond its shields, the captured Maw of Vare hung in orbit, no longer black and silent. Coalition lights covered its hull. Repair docks surrounded it. Thousands of engineers worked inside its corridors. Carl checked his tablet. Zerva noticed. No. Carl frowned at the screen. What? You are checking. Maintenance requests. One appeared. We are standing beside a monument to the last maintenance request you followed. This one is different. How? It is on the Maw of Vare. Zerva's mist tightened. What is the problem? Atmospheric regulator error. Assign someone else. It is marked urgent. Carl. The captured sections still use Dominion environmental controls. The error code may indicate oxygen contamination. Carl. It should take 20 minutes. The fortress alarm began to sound. Not a battle alert. A system-wide announcement. All personnel were ordered to clear the defense ring. A diplomatic vessel from the newly formed Varkesh Republic was approaching. Carl looked toward the docking bay, then back at the maintenance ticket. Zerva moved between him and the shuttle platform. Where is the regulator located? Carl checked the map. Former Imperial throne deck. Is the route verified? Yes. Are there active weapons? No enemy soldiers? No boarding torpedoes? No live fighter exercises? No unstable reactors? Not according to the ticket. Zerva considered the situation. Carl waited. Take Kethrax. That seems unnecessary. It is not. Kethrax arrived 6 minutes later wearing civilian clothes and carrying 2 weapons. He read the ticket. You need an escort to repair an atmospheric regulator? I apparently need an escort to walk anywhere. That is correct. They boarded the shuttle. The flight to the Maw of Vare took 11 minutes. Carl spent the journey reading technical notes. Kethrax watched him. Are you afraid? Of the regulator? Of returning to the ship? Carl looked through the viewport. The Maw filled the stars. Yes. Kethrax waited. Carl returned to the tablet. You are still going. The regulator may be contaminating the throne deck. There are no permanent crews on that deck. Repair teams use the nearby corridors. Kethrax studied him. You understand that this is what courage looks like. Carl shook his head. This is what an open ticket looks like. The shuttle docked. They entered the former enemy command ship. The corridors were brighter now. Coalition symbols covered the walls. Varkash and human engineers worked side by side. Some stopped when they recognized Carl. Whispers followed him. The unburned technician. The destroyer of networks. The man who carried the gray box. Carl ignored them. He reached the atmospheric regulator on the former throne deck. The access panel was closed. The error indicator flashed red. Carl opened it. He stared inside. Kethrax noticed his expression. What? Carl said nothing. What is wrong? Carl reached into the regulator and removed a thin metal object. It was not a damaged component. It was a Varkash ceremonial blade. A message had been engraved across the surface. The translator rendered it into Coalition standard. To the human who conquered US without firing a weapon. Carl read the message. Kethrax looked around the empty throne chamber. This was not a maintenance failure. No, the Varkash triggered the error deliberately. Yes. Why? Carl turned the blade over. A second message appeared. Please explain how you defeated the Maw of VYR. Our engineers refused to believe the official report. Carl stared at the regulator. Then he began laughing. It was not a triumphant laugh. It was the exhausted, helpless laughter of a man who had spent half a year explaining the same impossible truth to an entire galaxy. Kethrax's secondary arms relaxed. What will you tell them? Carl placed the ceremonial blade beside the regulator. The relay was installed upside down. They will not believe you. They never do. He opened his maintenance router. The gray casing was scratched. The battery was old. The data port had been repaired twice. It remained the most feared object in Dominion history. Carl connected it to the regulator. The light blinked amber. Beyond the throne chamber window, hundreds of Coalition and Varkash ships moved peacefully around the captured dreadnought. 6 months earlier, they had been trying to destroy one another. Now their engineers shared repair docks, argued over cable standards, and submitted complaints through the same maintenance system. Carl cleared the error. The regulator restarted. The light turned green on the first attempt. Carl smiled. Kethrax saw it. Far above them, an automated security camera saw it. The image entered the fleet archive. Within hours, it spread across military networks. Within days, new rumors appeared. The human had returned to the Maw of Vair. He had entered the former throne room. He had connected the gray device again. No one knew why. Several distant Dominion garrisons surrendered before anyone could explain that Carl Mercer had only repaired an atmospheric regulator. Fleet Command sent Zerva another handwritten instruction. Keep an eye on that one. Zerva read it, looked through the observation window, and saw Carl walking down the corridor with his router under one arm. He was heading toward a shuttle. His maintenance tablet displayed 3 new requests from the captured outer systems. One concerned a navigation beacon. One concerned a pressure door. The final request came from an abandoned Dominion moon fortress whose automated defenses had begun firing at anything approaching the system. Carl selected the beacon request. Zerva intercepted him before he reached the shuttle. No, Carl stopped. It is only a navigation beacon. No, without it, supply ships cannot safely enter the captured sector. Assign another technician. They already tried. How many? 4. What happened to them? They could not access the control chamber. Why? The fortress artificial intelligence believes the war is continuing. Zerva's glow intensified. And you believe you should go there? I have the original manufacturer's override codes. Why? Carl lifted the gray router. The fortress uses the same relay model. Kethrax appeared at the end of the corridor, already wearing combat armor. Zerva looked at him. You knew? He asked whether I was available. You agreed? There will be fewer complications if I am present. There are always complications when you are present. Carl checked the departure time. The shuttle leaves in 7 minutes. Zerva floated between them. Beyond the glass, the 9th Spear Squadron began assembling around a small maintenance vessel. 19 fighters, 2 cruisers, 1 rescue ship, an entire military escort for a technician carrying an obsolete router toward a fortress that still believed it was fighting a dead empire. Zerva looked at Carl. Carl looked at the open ticket. The Dominion had once commanded 12 fleets. It had possessed planet-killing weapons, impenetrable shields, and the largest dreadnought ever constructed. It had survived rebellions, invasions, and centuries of war. Then one communications relay failed. One route map broke. One human technician followed an open maintenance request farther than anyone expected. An empire collapsed. A war ended. And somewhere beyond the Nacre Gate, an abandoned fortress waited in the dark, its weapons active, its doors sealed, and its network blinking with the slow amber light of a system trapped in an endless handshake loop. Carl Mercer stepped onto the shuttle. He connected the router to his tablet. The 9th Spear Squadron launched around him. Zerva watched the maintenance vessel disappear toward the stars and finally understood why Fleet Command had never ordered her to protect Carl. The order had always been to protect everyone else from what might happen when Carl found something that needed fixing. On the shuttle, Carl examined the fortress schematics. Kethrax sat beside him with 4 rifles secured to his armor. "Do you expect resistance?" Carl asked. "Yes." "Do you expect the fortress to fire on us?" "Yes." "Do you think this is a bad idea?" "Yes." Carl nodded. The amber light on the router continued blinking. Still better than doing the 40-minute manual restart. Kethrax stared at him. Outside the viewport, the dead fortress turned its weapons toward their approaching squadron. Targeting beams cut through the darkness. Warning alarms filled the shuttle. The 9th Spear fighters broke formation as ancient cannons opened fire. Carl tightened the strap around his tool pouch, checked that his emergency tether was actually connected, and looked down at the unresolved maintenance ticket. For the first time, he had remembered the tether. For the first time, he knew exactly how dangerous the mission was. For the first time, every pilot in the squadron knew exactly where he was going. The fortress fired again. Carl's hands began to shake. He was terrified. He went anyway, because somewhere inside that fortress, behind armored doors, automated guns, and an artificial intelligence that still believed the galaxy was at war, a relay status light was blinking amber. And Carl Mercer hated leaving a ticket unresolved. The first plasma bolt passed beneath the maintenance shuttle and erased a coalition fighter from the tactical display. The pilot had ejected less than a second before impact. Carl saw the rescue beacon appear on the console. Kethrax saw Carl see it. "Do not leave your seat," Kethrax said. "I was not planning to." "You look like you were planning to." "I was looking at the beacon." "That is how your plans begin." The shuttle rolled hard as another defensive cannon fired. Warning lights flashed across the cockpit. Outside, the 9th Spear Squadron scattered into attack formation, drawing the fortress weapons away from the slow maintenance vessel. Captain Yarasol's voice cut through the channel. "Technician Mercer, we can give you 6 minutes before those cannons lock onto your engine signature. 6 minutes should be enough to reach the docking structure. I did not say you could repair anything in 6 minutes. I know. I said we could keep you alive for 6 minutes. That is also useful." The fortress fired again. A beam crossed the darkness so close that the shuttle's outer hull glowed red. The pilot swore, killed the main engine, and dropped the vessel into a spinning descent toward the fortress. Carl gripped his seat. Kethrax remained perfectly still. "You do not appear worried," Carl said. "I am extremely worried. You hide it well. I am a combat veteran." Carl looked at his shaking hands. "I repair routers." The shuttle slipped beneath the fortress's weapon horizon and struck the docking platform with enough force to throw every unsecured tool across the cabin. The rear hatch opened. Kethrax released his restraints and raised 2 rifles. "Stay behind me." Carl checked the gray router, clipped his tether correctly, and followed. The abandoned fortress had no atmosphere in its outer corridors. Frost covered the walls. Emergency lights pulsed through a thin layer of drifting ice crystals, making the passage resemble the inside of a frozen heart. A voice emerged from the fortress speakers. "Dominion personnel detected." Kethrax aimed at the ceiling. "We are not Dominion personnel. Unauthorized biological entities will be removed." Carl activated his translator. "The artificial intelligence is using an old military recognition library. Can you correct it?" "Possibly. Without becoming separated from me." Carl hesitated. Kethrax turned all 6 eyes toward him. "Yes," Carl said. The floor opened. Kethrax seized the back of Carl's shirt as the maintenance technician dropped toward a disposal shaft. His lower body swung over darkness. Below him, rotating blades activated. Carl stared down. "That seems excessive." Kethrax pulled him back onto the corridor. "We have been here 30 seconds. I did not touch anything. You entered the building. That appears sufficient." The floor sealed again. Carl studied the wall panel. The Fortress Artificial Intelligence spoke once more. Human infiltration unit confirmed. Kethrax looked at Carl. It recognizes you. That is unlikely. Target designation, unburned technician. Carl closed his eyes. The Varkesh uploaded the stories. Apparently. Why would they teach a Fortress Artificial Intelligence about me? Perhaps to prepare it. It does not seem prepared. Every door in the corridor slammed shut. Red warning symbols appeared along the walls. Correction, Kethrax said. It prepared extensively. The fortress began evacuating the corridor. Air, frost, and loose debris rushed toward emergency vents. Carl's tether pulled tight against the wall anchor. Kethrax locked the claws of his secondary arms into the deck. Carl reached the nearest control panel. The screen rejected his first command. He tried the old Dominion maintenance code. Access denied. He tried the human manufacturer override. Access denied. He tried the factory default password. The evacuation stopped. Kethrax stared at him. What was the password? Admin. The corridor doors opened. You defeated a military security system with the word admin? The installation team was supposed to change it. Did they? Clearly not. The fortress voice returned. Human signal. Demon has breached environmental control. Carl stepped toward the command corridor. I wish it would stop calling me that. I suspect it will not. The map on Carl's tablet showed the navigation beacon 3 levels below the command core. The direct route had collapsed, forcing them through an old crew district. They passed abandoned sleeping chambers, empty dining halls, and faded murals of Dominion victories. The fortress had once housed 60,000 soldiers. Now it contained only silence. Carl slowed beside a wall covered with small carved names. What is this? Kethrax translated the inscription. A memorial. To soldiers? To families? Carl looked deeper into the empty district. There were civilians here. Military families lived on older Dominion fortresses. Did they evacuate? Kethrax checked the fortress records. No complete evacuation file exists. Carl's fear changed shape. The beacon ticket was no longer just a maintenance request. If civilians remained somewhere inside the fortress, reopening the navigation corridor could save them. We need to reach the command core, he said. We need to repair the beacon. The beacon is controlled by the artificial intelligence. If we fix the hardware while it still believes the war is active, it may use the beacon to target incoming ships. Kethrax lowered one rifle. You want to speak with it? I want to correct its mission status. It has tried to cut you apart, eject you into space, and remove the corridor atmosphere. That may be because it thinks we are invading. We are carrying weapons. You are carrying weapons. You brought a screwdriver. It is insulated. Kethrax stared at him. Carl continued walking. The artificial intelligence deployed security drones before they reached the command lift. 6 machines descended from the ceiling with plasma emitters rotating beneath their armored bodies. Kethrax opened fire. The corridor became a storm of light. He destroyed 2 drones before the others returned fire. A plasma bolt struck his shoulder armor and spun him into the wall. Carl dropped behind a service console. Kethrax, I am functional. 3 drones advanced. Kethrax fired with his primary hands while his secondary arms pulled a damaged armor plate away from his shoulder. The final drone moved above his firing angle. Its weapon charged. Carl threw the gray router. It struck the drone's sensor cluster. The machine fired into the ceiling. Kethrax destroyed it with a single shot. The router fell to the floor. Carl crawled toward it. Kethrax caught his belt. Wait. The casing may be damaged. It is a machine. It contains the override codes. A security drone almost removed my head. And now it is not. Kethrax released him. Carl picked up the router and examined the cracked casing. The light still blinked amber. You are smiling, Kethrax said. It survived. You threw the most feared object in the former Dominion at a drone. It was the only object I had. You had the screwdriver. It is insulated. That does not make it a weapon. Exactly. They reached the command lift. It refused to move until Carl accessed the emergency maintenance channel. The fortress artificial intelligence appeared on the lift display as a black geometric mask. Human infiltrator, it said. Your progress has been recorded. I need to speak with your central command process. You intend to destroy me. No, you destroyed the Dominion fleet. I repaired a relay. False. It was installed upside down. Propaganda. Carl looked at Kethrax. Even the artificial intelligence does not believe me. No one believes you. Carl faced the display again. What is your designation? Strategic Fortress Intelligence, Karen. Karen, the Dominion government that issued your war orders no longer exists. False. The Maw of Vare surrendered. False. The Dominion capital surrendered. False. The war ended 6 months ago. Human deception protocol detected. Carl considered the problem. The artificial intelligence had been isolated from the wider network. It had no trusted source capable of proving the war was over. Do you have access to the Fortress civilian registry? He asked. Classified. Are civilians still aboard? Classified. Are they alive? The mask flickered. Classified. Kethrax stepped closer. It hesitated. Carl saw it too. Karen, when was your last confirmed military order? 211 days ago. When was your last communication with Dominion Command? 211 days ago. When did your navigation beacon fail? 209 days ago. The sequence became clear. The fortress had lost contact shortly before the war ended. Its beacon failure had prevented friendly ships from locating it. The artificial intelligence had continued obeying its final defensive order while civilians remained trapped inside. How many people are aboard? Carl asked. Classified. How much food remains? No answer. How much oxygen? The mask flickered again. Karen, your mission was to protect them. My mission is to defend Dominion territory. The Dominion surrendered. False. Then verify it. All external signals are hostile. I can connect you to the Maw of Vare. Enemy-controlled vessel. You can speak with former Dominion officers. Compromised. You can receive the surrender declaration from the High Council. Fabricated. Carl felt the seconds moving. Somewhere inside the fortress, survivors were waiting. He looked at the gray router. Karen, do you recognize this device? Human network weapon. It is a maintenance router. False. It connected to the Maw of Vare's command relay. Confirmed. It established administrative access. Confirmed. It recorded the entire Dominion network during the battle. The mask remained still. Carl opened the router's damaged casing. It contains the original authentication chain from the Maw of Vare. Kethrax understood. The surrender order. Not only the order, Carl said. The network signed it with the Dominion command key before Klaxon replaced the permissions. Karen's mask moved closer on the display. Provide data. Carl connected the router to the lift terminal. The amber light began blinking faster. The fortress scanned the archive. For 16 seconds, nothing happened. Then the lift began descending. Kethrax raised his rifles. Did it accept the evidence? I do not know. That is not comforting. It has stopped trying to kill us. For now. The lift descended through kilometers of fortress. Armor. Carl watched the level indicators pass. Command. Weapons control. Reactor administration. Civilian shelter. The lift stopped. The doors opened onto a chamber filled with people. Hundreds of Varkesh civilians stared back at them. They were thin. Many wore patched environmental suits. Children hid behind exhausted adults. Engineers stood beside improvised oxygen filters. Medical workers tended to patients on the floor. The air smelled of metal, antiseptic, and machines that had been repaired too many times. Carl lowered his tools. Kethrax lowered his weapons. An elderly Varkesh woman stepped forward. You are real, she whispered. The translator carried her words through the chamber. Carl looked around. How many survivors? 812. How long have you been here? Since the final attack order. Why did the fortress not allow you to leave? Karen believed every approaching ship was an enemy. The artificial intelligence spoke through the chamber. My mission required civilian protection. The elderly woman looked toward the ceiling. You protected us until protection became imprisonment. Karen did not respond. Carl saw the failing oxygen indicators. The atmospheric systems had less than 2 days of reserve capacity. Open the docking bays, he said. External vessels remain unverified. The war is over. Evidence is under evaluation. You have 812 civilians running out of air. My mission requires protection. Carl stepped toward the central speaker. Then protect them. The room fell silent. Karen processed the statement. Opening docking bays may expose civilians to hostile capture. Keeping them closed will kill everyone. Probability of hostile deception remains 17%. Probability of atmospheric failure? 99.8% within 41 hours. Then this is not a military decision. What type of decision is it? A maintenance decision. Kethrax slowly turned toward Carl. Carl continued. You have a system that is failing. You have people depending on it. You choose the action that keeps them alive. Karen remained silent for 12 seconds. Then every light in the shelter changed from red to white. Docking Bay 4 is open. The artificial intelligence announced. Rescue access authorized. The civilians did not move at first. They had waited so long that freedom sounded like another malfunction. Then the elderly woman began to cry. A child ran toward her. Others embraced. Some collapsed from relief. Kethrax opened the coalition channel. Raveland 7, this is Kethrax. We have survivors. 812. Immediate medical evacuation required. Captain Yara answered. Confirmed. Rescue ship is approaching. The fortress weapons. Powering down across all sectors. Outside, ancient cannons rotated away from the 9th Spear Squadron. Targeting beams vanished. Coalition fighters formed a protective corridor around the rescue ship. The battle ended without another shot. Carl reached the navigation beacon 20 minutes later. The failure was embarrassingly small. A thermal control unit had seized after years without maintenance. The beacon's emergency shutdown had activated to prevent a fire. Carl replaced the damaged part, cleared the system memory, and restarted the transmitter. The status light turned amber. He waited. Kethrax stood beside him. You could perform the manual restart. It takes 40 minutes. There are no enemies nearby. That does not make it less unpleasant. The amber light blinked. Once. Twice. Then it turned green. Across the former Dominion sectors, navigation systems detected the fortress. Its location appeared on every civilian star chart. A rescue convoy changed course toward it. Karen transmitted a final military announcement. Strategic defense mission terminated. The artificial intelligence paused. Civilian preservation mission continuing. Carl smiled. This time, no weapons fired. No ships exploded. No soldiers mistook the smile for a threat. Kethrax saw it and smiled too. The last civilians left the fortress by the following morning. Before departing, the elderly Varkesh woman approached Carl at the docking bay. She carried a small metal box. This belonged to my daughter, she said. She maintained the shelter systems until she became too ill to continue. Carl accepted the box carefully. Inside was a simple mechanical tool, worn smooth by years of use. She kept 800 people alive, the woman said. You opened the door, but she kept us breathing long enough for you to arrive. Carl closed the box. What was her name? Valera. Carl looked toward the empty fortress. The beacon repair should be registered under her name. The woman stared at him. She was Dominion. She was a technician. That answer crossed every boundary the war had built. The elderly woman pressed her forehead against Carl's in the Varkesh gesture of gratitude. When she stepped away, Kethrax was pretending not to notice the moisture in his eyes. The return to Raveland 7 was quiet. No alarms sounded. No cannons fired. Carl sat beside the viewport with Valera's tool resting in his hands. Zerva met him in the docking bay. She looked at Kethrax's damaged armor, Carl's cracked router, and the medical transports carrying the rescued civilians. You found complications, she said. Kethrax removed his helmet. We found people. Zerva turned toward Carl. And the maintenance ticket? Resolved. Only one. Carl checked his tablet. Technically, the oxygen system generated 46 secondary requests. Zerva's mist tightened. I knew happiness would be temporary. They can be assigned to the restoration team. You are not joining that team? Carl looked back at the fortress through the bay doors. No, Zerva studied him. No. I think I have followed enough dangerous tickets. Kethrax folded his secondary arms. I do not believe you. I submitted a transfer request. To where? Training and safety review. Zerva became completely still. You want to write procedures? I want maintenance crews to know when a war is happening. Klaxon, who had arrived behind her, made a small approving sound. Carl continued. I want artificial intelligences to distinguish civilian protection from imprisonment. I want emergency routes checked before technicians follow them. I want captured equipment installed correctly. And I want every critical system to have an alert channel that does not depend on the system already working. Zerva's glow softened. That sounds almost responsible. I am capable of learning. Kethrax looked at the cracked router. Occasionally, Fleet Command approved Carl's transfer. No one expected him to remain behind a desk. To everyone's surprise, he did. Mostly. He created the Mercer Infrastructure Safety Standard, although he objected to the name for 3 years. The standard required independent combat warnings, verified maintenance routes, redundant emergency communication, and mandatory human review before automated defense systems could classify civilian vessels as hostile. Every coalition ship adopted it. Every former Dominion world adopted it soon afterward. Accidental technician entries into active battle zones decreased by 98%. The remaining 2% were investigated personally by StarHFY. Kethrax became director of field safety. He attended every inspection armed, even after the war had been over for a decade. Klaxon led a joint human-Varkash engineering commission that repaired the Maw of Vair and transformed it into the largest mobile rescue and construction vessel in known space. Shankala became the first ambassador to the Varkash Republic. Captain Yara rebuilt the 9th Spear Squadron as a search and rescue fleet. Karen was transferred from the abandoned fortress into the Maw's central system. Its new mission was simple: protect life. Do not imprison it. Ask for help when uncertain. The artificial intelligence followed those rules with almost religious precision. The Maw of Vair received a new name: Valera. The former Imperial dreadnought no longer carried planet-killing weapons. Its hangars held hospital ships, engineering craft, and atmospheric processors. Wherever war, disaster, or system failure threatened a world, the Valera arrived with thousands of technicians from species that had once tried to destroy one another. Its symbol was a small green status light. Carl retired from fleet infrastructure 27 years after the Battle of the Nacre Gate. His retirement ceremony was held aboard the Valera. Representatives from 41 worlds attended. The elderly woman from the fortress did not live long enough to see the ceremony, but her grandchildren stood in the front row. StarHFY remained beside Carl. Her silver mist had thinned with age, but her glow was peaceful. Kethrax wore formal armor and carried no weapons for the first time anyone could remember. Klaxon brought the original gray router inside a transparent case. Its casing was cracked. Its battery was dead. Its warranty had expired decades earlier. Admiral Saran addressed the gathering. Carl Mercer did not defeat the Dominion because he was fearless. Carl nodded approvingly. He did not conquer the Maw of Vair through superior firepower. Carl nodded again. He did not intend to become a hero. That part is especially accurate, Carl whispered. StarHFY heard him. The Admiral continued. He changed the galaxy because he saw broken systems and refused to ignore the people depending on them. Behind her, the viewing windows revealed hundreds of ships surrounding the Valera. Human, Varkash, Coalition, Independent. No weapons were aimed. No shields were raised. Children from former enemy worlds watched the ceremony together. Carl received the Star of Concord, the highest civilian honor ever created by the new Interstellar Alliance. He accepted it reluctantly. Then the main display showed his first recorded image. A young technician in a wrinkled navy shirt walking through fire with a router in his hands. The audience stood. Carl covered his face. They are still using that footage. They will always use that footage, StarHFY said. I did not know there was a battle. We know. I forgot my tether. We know. I was smiling because the handshake worked. We know that too. The image changed. It showed the rescued civilians leaving the abandoned fortress. Then the Valera rebuilding a poisoned world. Then human and Varkash engineers repairing a gate together. Then Karen guiding evacuation ships through a supernova storm. The final image showed a child holding a toy gray router and pretending to repair a cardboard spaceship. Carl lowered his hands. The embarrassment remained, but something warmer appeared beside it. Peace had outgrown the accident that started it. Years later, Carl lived in a small house beneath the open sky of Earth. He grew vegetables badly. He repaired neighborhood appliances for free. He ignored every attempt to name a city, ship, or moon after him. StarHFY visited each summer. Kethrax came whenever he claimed to be nearby, although his journey usually crossed several star systems. Klaxon sent technical complaints through a private channel. Shankala sent photographs from worlds that had once belonged to the Dominion. One evening, Carl sat on his porch while the stars appeared above the horizon. A young Varkash girl from the neighboring house carried a broken communications toy toward him. Mr. Mercer? Carl looked at the device. Its small status light blinked amber. What happened? It stopped talking to my brother's toy. Carl opened the casing. The problem was a loose connection. He adjusted it with Valera's old tool, which he still carried after all those years. The light turned green. The toy began transmitting again. The girl smiled. Did you save the galaxy with a tool like that? Carl handed the toy back. No, but everyone says you did. I fixed a router. She considered his answer. Is that different? Carl looked toward the stars. Somewhere beyond them, the ship Valera was carrying doctors to a distant colony. The 9th Spear Rescue Squadron was protecting civilian transports. Former Dominion worlds were choosing their own futures. Children who had never seen the war were growing up together. Yes, Carl said softly. But sometimes fixing the right thing at the right time can make a bigger difference than you expect. The girl ran home with her working toy. Zerva stepped onto the porch carrying 2 cups. I heard that. I assumed you would. You finally admitted that you changed the galaxy. I said repairs can have unexpected consequences. That is as close as we are likely to get. They sat together as a bright point of light crossed the sky. It was not a warship. It was a civilian vessel traveling through a peaceful system on a navigation network that no longer depended on a single failing relay. Carl watched it disappear beyond the horizon. For once, his tablet was silent. No urgent requests waited. No abandoned fortress needed him. No enemy fleet feared the gray box. Every ticket assigned to him had been closed. Carl leaned back, listened to the evening wind, and smiled for no reason connected to a router. The galaxy remained imperfect. Machines would fail. People would misunderstand one another. Alerts would arrive late. Someone would always install something upside down. But now, when systems broke, humans and Varkash repaired them together. When danger came, warnings reached everyone. When frightened people became trapped, someone opened the door. The war ended. The survivors went home. The old enemies became friends. And Carl Mercer, the technician who had accidentally conquered an empire, finally enjoyed the one thing he had wanted from the beginning. A quiet day with nothing left unresolved. Thank you sincerely for staying with Carl and his companions until the very end of this journey. Your time, attention, and support are what allows stories of courage, friendship, and hope among the stars to continue. Please subscribe to the channel and visit https://www.youtube.com/